the Bolivian government, since it signed a deal with China in 2019 and other deals in the past,
Yes.
to expand the agricultural frontier in order to export more beef to China, 10 times more than the amount that we usually produce per year. They essentially legalize the use of fires. And a lot of people, when they hear fires in the Amazon, they think of Brazil. But for example, Masi, just last year, the area that burned in Bolivia equals to the size of Portugal. We had an area that big burning in my country, and people abroad only think of Brazil. They never ever talk about Bolivia. Again, the Bolivian government is really good at downplaying their own mistakes so that the international media doesn't care. And then the ideological lens on much of the journalists in the West,
Yes.
they only look at what they think are right-wing governments, and they think that the left-wing governments in Latin America are not doing anything against the indigenous people or the environment, when in reality it's even worse because there's less checks and balances. In our case, we work a lot with firefighters. We don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. We are there with the firefighters. We go with them. We train on how to support them.
Oh.
We try to identify the people that are starting the fires. And we have noticed that this is a pattern that doesn't only include the agricultural expansion, which already, again, benefits the government and the Chinese government.
Yes.
So there's an authoritarian interest there. But there's also a lot of interest from drug trafficking rings that, again, are part of this government structure, because drug traffickers need space in protected areas in order to have their factories and to move the merchandise out of the country. So for them, it's easier to clear land for any of these things with fires. It's cheaper than to do it themselves. It's even easier to do it without being caught, if you want to think of it that way, which is why in Bolivia, some firefighters, when they come to the natural area to put off the fire, they receive shootings from the inside from drug trafficking rings. And we even had an underage firefighter. He was 16 years old, I think,
And he
died because of this. And it's a very, very difficult situation. And in this process, I have learned a lot being on the ground, being with the firefighters and with our team, because people think that democracy issues are in one bucket, the environment is in another bucket, women's issues are in another bucket. But what I keep trying to explain to people is,
the link.
if there is no rule of law, and if there is an international incentive for the government to destroy the environment, number one, the beneficiary of those resources are going to be an authoritarian government who will use these resources to stay in power as long as possible. It's entrenching authoritarianism. It's making it stronger. But then on the other end, if there is no rule of law, and I've experienced this myself and other activists in Bolivia, anyone can come and shoot you, and they're not going to be responsible.